The doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m., and Marco DeLuca knew before opening it that someone's world was ending. Nobody knocked on his door in Lincoln Park at this hour, unless they were desperate, stupid, or both. He'd been going through contracts in his study, the kind that never saw courtrooms, the kind that kept Chicago's underworld running smoothly, when the bell rang. Sharp, insistent. Then again. Then a third time with the rhythm of panic. Through the security camera monitor, he saw her. The teacher from his nephew's school. The one who always looked like she was bracing for impact, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes constantly scanning exits. She was holding a small boy against her chest, the child's face buried in her neck. Even through the grainy camera feed, Marco could see her hands shaking. He was at the door in 4 strides. When he opened it, the November wind cut through the foyer, bringing the smell of old snow and desperation. The woman looked up at him with eyes so exhausted they were almost gray, though he remembered them being brown in the fluorescent lights of the school hallway. Her thin coat was inadequate for the Chicago winter. The boy in her arms wasn't moving. Mr. DeLuca. Her voice cracked on his name. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else." She stopped, swallowed hard. "Noah fell at the playground after school. I thought he was fine. But he's burning up and there's blood and I can't." Another pause. The words seemed to stick in her, throat like broken glass. "I can't take him to the hospital." Marco's eyes went to the child. 5 years old, maybe. The same age his nephew Luca had been when Marco took custody. The boy's arm was wrapped in what looked like a torn t-shirt, soaked through with blood. His small face was flushed with fever, pressed against his mother's collarbone. Unconscious or sleeping, Marco couldn't tell. "Come inside." Marco stepped back, already pulling out his phone. The woman hesitated on the threshold. Of course she did. Marco recognized the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of dangers, the desperate math of survival. She was afraid of him. She just didn't know why yet. "Please," he said, and the word felt foreign in his mouth. Men in his position didn't say please. They gave orders. But something about the way she held that child, like he was the only thing keeping her upright, made Marco remember what it felt like to beg. She stepped inside. Welcome to Crimson Redemption. Stories where second chances aren't just for the innocent. They're for the broken, the dangerous, and the ones brave enough to change. If this story already has your heart racing, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story that'll make you believe in redemption, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now let's see how one knock on the wrong door changed 3 lives forever. Marco closed the door behind them, sealing out the cold. The woman stood in his marble foyer looking utterly out of place, her worn sneakers leaving wet prints on the Italian tile. She was thin, not naturally slender, but the kind of thin that came from skipping meals, from choosing between groceries and rent. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had come half undone, strands sticking to her damp cheeks. "I'm calling my doctor," Marco said, already dialing. "He lives 10 minutes away. He'll come." "I can't pay." "I didn't ask you to." The call connected. "Dr. Abadi, I need you at my house. Now. Child, approximately 5 years old, fever, laceration on the arm. No, not Luca. Just come." He hung up before there could be questions. The woman was staring at him like he'd just performed a magic trick. "He'll just come? At midnight?" "He's on retainer." Marco gestured toward the living room. "Sit down before you fall down." She moved like someone used to obeying commands, muscle memory overriding hesitation. Marco watched her, sink onto his leather sofa, adjusting the boy carefully in her arms. The child stirred, whimpered something that might have been Mama, and went still again. "What's your name?" Marco asked, though he already knew. He'd seen it on the school contact sheet when he picked up Luca last week. Natalie Chen. Emergency contact. None. Medical authorization. Teacher only. He'd noticed because those were the kinds of details that told stories. Natalie. She was looking down at her son, not at Marco. Natalie Chen. This is Noah. I'm Marco. I know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You're Luca's uncle. You're always late to pick him up. The observation stung more than it should have. Marco worked 60-hour weeks keeping the Castellano family's legal operations running smoothly, and the illegal ones invisible. Being late to school pickup was the least of his sins. But in her tone, there was no judgment, just recognition. She'd been watching him the same way he'd now been watching her, trying to figure out who was safe and who wasn't. Traffic from downtown, Marco said, which was sometimes even true. Natalie nodded like she believed him, or like she didn't care enough to challenge the lie. Her attention was entirely on Noah, her hand pressed against his forehead, lips moving in what might have been prayer or just the desperate mantras mothers said when their children were in danger. Marco studied her in the warm lamplight of his living room. She looked younger than he'd thought, mid-20s maybe. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that spoke of weeks without proper sleep. A small scar bisected her left eyebrow. Her nails were bitten down to the quick. And the way she held herself, shoulders curled inward, head slightly bowed. That was the posture of someone who'd learned to make herself small. He knew that posture. He'd seen it on his sister before she died. On women who came to the family asking for protection from husbands, boyfriends, fathers. On people who discovered that the world was a dangerous place, and they were soft targets. Why can't you take him to the hospital? Marco asked quietly. Natalie's jaw tightened. I just can't. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She met his eyes for the first time, and Marco saw something fierce flicker in that exhausted brown gaze. Are you going to help him, or not? Fair enough. He didn't answer questions about his work either. Dr. Abadi will be here soon, Marco said. In the meantime, let me see the arm. Natalie shifted Noah carefully, unwrapping the makeshift bandage. The gash ran from his elbow to his wrist, deep enough that Marco could see the white of something that might have been bone. The boy must have fallen hard. The edges of the wound were angry red, the surrounding skin hot to the touch. Playground equipment? Marco asked. Metal slide. It was old, rusted. There was a sharp edge where the panels connected. Natalie's voice was mechanical, reciting facts to avoid feeling them. He was running, not looking. Went down hard. There was so much blood. I got him to stop crying, wrapped it, took him home. But then the fever started and he wouldn't wake up properly and... She stopped, closing her eyes. I didn't know what to do. So you came here. You always look like you have resources. The words came out in a rush, like a confession. Nice car. Nice suits. You talk on the phone like you're used to people doing what you say. I thought maybe you'd know a doctor who worked late, or could get me antiseptic and bandages without asking questions, or... She trailed off, looking down at Noah. I didn't think you'd actually call someone to your house. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put you in this position. Marco sat down in the armchair across from her, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled. Why do you think you put me in a position? Because now you're involved. Natalie's voice dropped to barely audible. And you didn't ask for that. You knocked on my door asking for help. I said yes. That's not a position. That's a choice. Marco kept his tone even, neutral. Dr. Abadi will stitch him up, give him antibiotics, and Noah will be fine. No hospitals, no records, no questions. Understand? Something crumpled in Natalie's expression. Relief so profound it looked like grief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I'll pay you back. I don't know how, but I will. I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" Marco looked at her, this woman who'd shown up on his doorstep at midnight with a bleeding child and eyes full of ghosts, and felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. Want was a dangerous word. Want was how people made mistakes. Want was how Marco had lost everything that mattered once before. "Nothing," he said. "I want nothing." The doorbell rang. Dr. Abadi, punctual as always, carrying his black medical bag and wearing the expression of someone who'd stopped asking questions about midnight house calls years ago. Marco let him in, led him to the living room, and watched as the older man knelt beside the sofa where Natalie still held Noah. "Let me see him, Mama," Dr. Abadi said gently. Natalie released her son like it physically hurt. The doctor examined Noah with efficient, practiced movements, checking pupils, pulse, temperature, finally unwrapping the arm fully. Marco saw him wince slightly at the depth of the wound. "He'll need stitches," Dr. Abadi confirmed. "And IV antibiotics. The fever suggests early infection. I can do it here if you have somewhere he can lie flat." "Guest room upstairs," Marco said immediately. "First door on the right." Natalie stood, lifting Noah. She was stronger than she looked, but Marco could see her arms shaking. The boy was small, but dead weight was still dead weight, and she'd been holding him for who knew how long. Marco moved without thinking, reaching out. "Let me carry him." Natalie's entire body went rigid. For a second, Marco thought she might refuse, but then Noah stirred, whimpered again, and she nodded once. Let Marco take the child from her arms. Noah was burning up, his small body radiating heat through Marco's dress shirt. His dark hair was damp with sweat, his breathing shallow. This close, Marco could see the resemblance to Natalie. Same delicate bone structure, same long lashes. But there was someone else in the boy's features too. Someone whose absence told its own story. Marco carried Noah upstairs, Natalie and Dr. Abadi following. The guest room was pristine, untouched. Marco laid Noah on the bed gently, stepping back to let the doctor work. Natalie hovered at the bedside, her hand finding Noah's uninjured one and holding tight. "This will hurt when he wakes," Dr. Abadi warned, preparing the IV line. "But I'll give him something for the pain first." Marco watched from the doorway as the doctor worked. Watched Natalie whisper to her unconscious son, promising he'd be okay, promising they'd be safe, promising things Marco wasn't sure she could guarantee. Watched the way her free hand gripped the edge of the mattress so hard her knuckles went white. He should leave. Let the doctor handle this. Send Natalie home with antibiotics and instructions. Go back to his contracts and his carefully controlled life. He should. But something kept him rooted in that doorway, watching this woman and child who'd stumbled into his world like refugees from a war he couldn't see. Dr. Abadi finished the IV, stitched the wound with meticulous care, wrapped it in clean white gauze. Noah slept through it all, the pain medication doing its job. When it was done, the doctor stood, wiping his hands. "He'll sleep for a few hours. The antibiotics will work fast, but he needs to stay on them for 10 days. No school for at least a week." Dr. Abadi pulled a prescription pad from his bag, scribbled quickly, handed the paper to Natalie. "I'll have these delivered. To Mr. DeLuca's address tomorrow. Keep the wound clean and dry. Change the dressing daily. If the fever doesn't break by morning, call me." Natalie took the prescription with trembling fingers. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing." Dr. Abadi glanced at Marco. "I'm already compensated." Before Natalie could protest, The doctor packed his bag and left, Marco walking him to the door. At the threshold, Dr. Abadi paused, lowered his voice. "That boy will be fine," he said. "But that mother? She's running from something. Or someone. It wasn't a question. Be careful, Marco." "I'm always careful." Dr. Abadi's expression said he didn't believe that for a second. "Your sister used to say the same thing." The mention of Isabella hit like a fist to the sternum. Marco's sister. Dead at 28 from an ectopic pregnancy that turned septic because she'd been too afraid to go to the hospital, too afraid her abusive ex would find her through the medical records, too afraid to ask for help, until it was too late. Marco had been in court that day, arguing a case he couldn't even remember now. By the time he got to her apartment, she was already gone. "Good night, doctor," Marco said, his voice flat. When he returned upstairs, Natalie was still sitting at Noah's bedside, holding his small hand. She'd pulled a chair close, her head bowed like she was praying, or crying, or both. "You can stay here tonight," Marco said from the doorway. Natalie's head snapped up. "What?" "It's late. He's asleep. You're exhausted. The guest room has its own bathroom. I'll bring you something to sleep in." Marco kept his voice matter-of-fact, giving her no room to argue. "In the morning, we'll talk." "Talk about what?" "About why you can't take your son to the hospital," Marco said quietly, "and what I can do to fix that." Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and panic slamming into her chest. Wrong room. Wrong bed. Wrong... Then she remembered. Marco DeLuca. The midnight knock. Noah's fever. She sat up fast enough to make the room spin, her borrowed t-shirt, soft, expensive, smelling like cedar and something masculine, twisting around her torso. The chair beside the bed was empty. Noah. She was on her feet and out the door before her brain fully caught up, heart hammering, bare feet silent on the hardwood hallway, following the sound of voices, children's voices, laughter. The kitchen was enormous, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances that probably cost more than Natalie's annual salary. Warm morning light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a snow-dusted backyard. And at the kitchen island, sitting on bar stools that were almost too tall for them, were two boys. Noah. And another child. Darker-skinned, maybe 6 years old, wearing Spider-Man pajamas. Luca, she realized. Marco's nephew. They were eating pancakes. Noah's injured arm was carefully propped on a pillow, still wrapped in white gauze, but his other hand held a fork, and he was laughing at something Luca was saying. His fever-flushed cheeks from last night had returned to their normal golden brown. He looked fine. He looked happy. He looked safe. "Mama!" Noah spotted her, his face lighting up. "Look! Uncle Marco made pancakes. They have chocolate chips." Uncle Marco. Natalie's eyes cut to the stove, where Marco DeLuca stood with a spatula in one hand and his phone in the other, wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater that should have made him look casual but somehow just made him look expensive. He glanced up, met her gaze, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Acknowledgement, maybe, or assessment. "Good morning," he said evenly. "Coffee's ready. How do you take it?" The domesticity of the question disoriented her. This man, this stranger she'd shown up at in the middle of the night, was asking how she took her coffee like they did this every morning. Like it was normal. "Black," Natalie managed. "Thank you." Marco poured. Without comment, handed her a mug. Their fingers brushed. His were warm from holding the cup. Hers were still cold from sleep panic. She pulled back, wrapped both hands around the ceramic, used it as a shield. Noah's fever broke around 4 a.m., Marco said. voice low enough the boys couldn't hear. Dr. Abadi texted to check in. I gave him children's ibuprofen from Luca's medicine cabinet. He's been awake since 7. Hungry. That's a good sign. You stayed up with him? The question came out, sharper than Natalie intended. Someone had to. Marco flipped a pancake with precise efficiency. You were asleep. You should have woken me. Why? So we could both be exhausted? Marco slid the pancake onto a plate, added it to the stack. You needed rest. I needed to make sure the antibiotics were working. Mutually beneficial arrangement. Mutually beneficial. Like this was a business transaction. Maybe for him it was. Natalie didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know what to do with any of this. The expensive kitchen, the casual pancake making, the way Noah was calling this stranger Uncle Marco like he'd known him for years instead of hours. Miss Chen! Luca waved his fork excitedly. Noah says you're his teacher too. Are you really? Do you give him homework? That's so cool. I teach kindergarten, Natalie said, moving to the island on autopilot. You'll have me next year. Do you give a lot of homework? Luca. Marco's voice held gentle warning. Eat your breakfast. The boy grinned but obeyed. Natalie slid onto the stool next to Noah, her hand automatically going to his forehead. Still warm, but normal warm. Human warm. Relief crashed through her so hard she had to close her eyes for a second. I'm okay, Mama, Noah said quietly. My arm hurts a little, but Uncle Marco said that's because it's getting better. He said the medicine is like little soldiers fighting the bad stuff. Did he? Natalie looked at Marco, who was very deliberately not looking at her. Also, he said I can watch cartoons after breakfast, Noah added. Can I, Mama? Please? How was she supposed to say no? Her son, who'd been unconscious with fever 12 hours ago, was asking to watch cartoons in a stranger's house like this was completely normal, like they weren't trespassing, like they belonged here. 1 episode, Natalie said. Then we need to go home. Something shifted in Marco's expression, but it was gone before she could read it. He set 2 more. Pancakes on a plate, slid it in front of her. She hadn't asked for food. Didn't remember the last time someone had given her something without her having to beg for it first. Thank you, she said stiffly. Marco just nodded, turned back to the stove. They ate in relative silence, the boys chattering to each other about cartoons and superheroes and some game they played at recess. Normal kid conversation. The kind Noah hadn't had in months because Natalie kept him isolated, kept him away from playdates and birthday parties and anything that might create a paper trail. She watched Marco clear plates, rinse them, load the dishwasher with the unconscious efficiency of someone who did this daily. No housekeeper appeared, no staff, just him, moving through his expensive kitchen like it was routine. Boys, go watch your show, Marco said. Living room, 30 minutes. They scrambled off the stools, Noah moving carefully with his injured arm. Natalie started to follow, but Marco's voice stopped her. Let them go. We need to talk. Natalie's entire body went tense. She'd known this was coming. Known she couldn't just show up at someone's door, accept their help and disappear without questions. But knowing didn't make it easier. I should get Noah home, she tried. In a minute. Marco leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not aggressive, but not yielding either. Last night you said you couldn't take Noah to the hospital. Why? That's my business. You made it mine when you knocked on my door. Marco's voice was calm, factual. I don't know you, Miss Chen. You don't know me. But I need to understand what I'm involved in. You're not involved in anything. I asked for help. You gave it. That's all. Is someone hurting you? The question was so direct it felt like a slap. Natalie's hands tightened on her coffee mug. No. Is someone hurting Noah? No, never. That much was true. She'd made sure of it. That was the whole point of running, of hiding, of this half-life they were living. Marco studied her face like he was reading a contract, looking for the loopholes. But someone wants to. It wasn't a question. Natalie didn't answer. Let me guess, Marco continued, voice still that same controlled neutral. Ex-husband, or ex-boyfriend, has legal custody or visitation rights. You ran to protect Noah. Can't go to hospitals because medical records are public, and he has access. Probably has connections. Lawyer, cop, someone who can track you through. The system. You've been off the grid how long? 6 months? A year? Natalie felt her face drain of color. How did you... Because I've seen it before. Marco's expression was unreadable. Too many times. And I need to know if you're in immediate danger. Why? So you can decide if helping us is worth the risk? The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. So I can decide how to help you properly. Marco pushed off the counter, closed some of the distance between them. Not threatening, just present. I have resources, Miss Chen. Legal ones. I can make sure Noah is safe without you having to live like a fugitive. I don't need your resources. Yes, you do. I said no. Natalie stood, chair scraping harshly against tile. Thank you for helping Noah. Thank you for breakfast. We'll go now. Go where? Back to your apartment that I'm guessing you pay for in cash? Back to looking over your shoulder every time you leave the house? Back to being one emergency away from losing everything? Marco's voice was still level, but there was something underneath it now. Something that sounded almost like anger. That's not a life. That's survival. There's a difference. At least it's mine. Natalie lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. At least I'm choosing it. And what happens the next time Noah gets hurt? What happens when he needs vaccinations for school, or breaks a bone, or has an allergic reaction? You going to knock on my door every time? No, I won't bother you. Again. That's not what Marco stopped, exhaled hard through his nose, recalibrating. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to help. Everyone who wants to control me starts by trying to help. The words hung in the air between them, too honest, too raw. Natalie regretted them immediately, but Marco's expression shifted, something like recognition passing through his dark eyes. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. I understand. He stepped back, giving her space. But take this. He pulled a business card from his wallet, set it on the counter. Simple, expensive cardstock. Marco DeLuca, attorney at law, a phone number, nothing else. You don't have to use it, Marco said. But if Noah needs medical attention again, or if you need legal help, or if... He paused. Just keep it. Please. Natalie looked at the card like it might bite her. But she took it. Slipped it into the pocket of the borrowed sweatpants Marco had left outside the guest room last night. I should get Noah, she said. Wait. Marco turned, opened a cabinet, pulled out a white paper bag. Antibiotics. Dr. Abadi had them delivered this morning. Instructions are inside. 10 days, twice daily. Don't skip doses even if Noah feels better. He handed her the bag, then reached into another cabinet and pulled out a container of children's ibuprofen. For the pain and inflammation, Marco added. And... He hesitated, then opened the refrigerator, started pulling out items. Milk, eggs, cheese, fresh fruit, bread. You said Noah likes chocolate chips. These are Luca's favorite pancakes. I wrote the recipe down. He was packing groceries into a reusable bag. Natalie watched, frozen. Mr. DeLuca, it's food, Miss Chen, not a marriage proposal. Marco kept packing. Noah needs to eat well while he recovers. You both do. I bought too much anyway. A lie. She could tell it was a lie. Consider it payment for not billing me for the tutoring session. What tutoring session? The one you're going to give Luca. Marco handed her the grocery bag. He's struggling with reading. His teacher recommended a tutor. You're qualified. I'll pay your standard rate, 3 times a week, here at the house, starting next week, if you're interested. Natalie stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you employment. There's a difference. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. Luca needs help. You're a teacher. It's a practical arrangement. Nothing more. But it was more. They both knew it was more. This was Marco's way of giving her money without it being charity. This was him creating a reason for her to come back, to accept help without feeling like she owed him. It was smart. It was kind. It was exactly the kind of thing that made Natalie want to run. I'll think about it, she heard herself say. That's all I'm asking. Marco pulled out his phone, typed quickly. I sent Luca's teacher's notes to your email. The school has it on file. Look them over. Let me know. He had her email. Of course he did. Teacher contact information was semi-public for parents. But still, the casual invasion of privacy should have bothered her more than it did. I need to get Noah, Natalie said again. This time, Marco nodded. Let her go. She found the boys in the living room, sprawled on a leather couch so large it could have fit 6 people. Some cartoon about talking animals played on a TV the size of a small car. Noah was curled against Luca, his injured arm resting on a cushion, his eyes heavy-lidded. Time to go, baby, Natalie said softly. Noah looked up at her, then at the TV, then back. Can we come back tomorrow? Luca perked up. Yeah, can Noah come back? We didn't finish our game. We'll see, Natalie said, the universal parent non-answer. Marco appeared with their coats, Natalie's thin windbreaker, and Noah's even thinner jacket. He looked at them both for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face. Wait here, he said. He disappeared upstairs, returned a minute later with a small navy blue puffer jacket. Child-sized, expensive brand. Luca outgrew this last year, Marco said, holding it out to Noah. You want it? Noah's eyes went wide. Really? Really. The boy took the jacket like it was treasure, hugged it to his chest. Natalie wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some dignity, some boundary. But Noah was already putting it on, zipping it up, beaming at how warm it was. What do you say, Noah? Natalie managed. Thank you, Uncle Marco. Uncle Marco, again. Like it was already decided. Like this strange, dangerous man was already family. Marco walked them to the door, handed Natalie the grocery bag and medication. Their fingers brushed again. This time she didn't pull away so fast. The offer stands, Marco said quietly. For the tutoring, and for anything else you need. I don't need anything. Everyone needs something, Miss Chen. Marco's dark eyes held hers. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it. Natalie didn't have an answer for that, so she just took Noah's hand and walked out into the cold December morning, feeling Marco's gaze on her back the entire way to her ancient Honda at the curb. As she buckled Noah into his booster seat, she saw Marco still standing in the doorway, watching, making sure they got into the car safely, making sure they left, or making sure he knew which car was hers. Natalie drove home through Lincoln Park's pristine streets, then across the city line into Southside's crumbling blocks, from warmth to cold, from safety to survival, from Marco DeLuca's world back to her own. But Noah fell asleep in the back seat wearing his new jacket, and Natalie's pocket held a business card and a job offer. And for the first time in months, she wasn't sure if running was the only option anymore. That thought terrified her more than anything. Natalie stood outside Marco DeLuca's house the following Tuesday evening. Noah's hand in hers, trying to convince herself this was just a job, just tutoring, just a practical arrangement between a teacher and a parent who could afford to pay. Just a lie she was telling herself, because the truth, that she needed this, needed him, needed the fragile promise of safety his world represented, was too dangerous to admit. She rang the bell. Marco answered within seconds, like he'd been waiting. He'd traded the weekend's casual sweater for a white dress shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark slacks, no tie. He looked like he'd come from work, looked like power barely contained in expensive fabric. "Miss Chen." His voice was formal, professional, like Sunday morning's pancakes had never happened. "Right on time." "Mr. DeLuca." They stood there for a beat too long, some unspoken thing hovering in the air between them. Then Noah tugged Natalie's hand. "Hi, Uncle Marco. Is Luca home? Can we play?" The corner of Marco's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "He's in the, playroom, third door on the left. Go ahead." Noah was gone in a flash, running down the hall in his new jacket that he refused to take off, even indoors. Marco watched him go, that same unreadable expression on his face he'd had when he gave Noah the coat. "He's doing well?" Marco asked. "The arm?" "Healing perfectly, no infection. He barely complains about it." Natalie shifted her bag on her shoulder. "Thank you again for—" "Don't." Marco's voice was quiet but firm. "Don't thank me every time. You see me. We're past that." Were they? Natalie wasn't sure what they were past, or what they were moving toward. She just knew that standing in his doorway felt different now. Less like trespassing, more like something she couldn't name. "Luca's materials are in the dining room," Marco said, stepping aside to let her in. "His teacher sent an updated assessment. He's about 6 months behind in reading comprehension. He knows his letters and sounds, but blending words is difficult. He gets frustrated easily. Most kids do, when reading feels like work instead of fun." Natalie followed Marco through the house, hyper-aware of the space between them. "Does he like stories?" "He loves them. I read to him every night." Of course he did. This man who looked like he'd kill someone without blinking, and probably had, read bedtime stories to his nephew every night. The contradiction should have felt false. Instead, it just felt confusing. The dining room table was set up like a classroom. Workbooks, flashcards, picture books arranged in neat stacks. A cup of juice boxes sat in the center, crayons in a container. Everything organized with the same precision Marco probably applied to his legal work. "You didn't have to do all this," Natalie said. "I wanted to make it easier." Marco pulled out a chair for her. "For both of you." Before Natalie could respond, Luca came running in with Noah trailing behind. "Miss Chen, Noah says you're the best teacher ever. Is it true you let kids bring stuffed animals on Fridays?" "Stuffed Animal Friday," Natalie confirmed, settling into the chair. "It's a kindergarten tradition." "See?" Luca turned to Noah triumphantly. "I told you she was cool." Marco caught Natalie's eye across the table. That almost smile was back. And for a second, just a second, the carefully maintained distance between them felt less like a wall and more like a door that might open. The tutoring session went better than expected. Luca was bright, engaged, and only frustrated when he genuinely struggled. Natalie worked through reading strategies, used games instead of drills, let Noah help by holding up picture cards. By the end of the hour, Luca had successfully read 3 sentences in a row, and the pride on his face was worth every minute. Can Miss Chen come back? Luca asked Marco, who'd been working on his laptop at the kitchen counter the entire time. Within earshot, but not hovering. If she's willing, Marco said. Same time Thursday? Natalie nodded. Thursday works. And Saturday morning, Marco added. If that's not too much. I'll pay for 3 sessions a week. It was generous. More than generous. It was exactly what Natalie needed to afford actual groceries instead of ramen and canned soup. Saturday works, she said. The routine established itself with surprising ease. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 90-minute sessions. Luca progressed steadily. Noah played nearby, drawing or building blocks or sometimes falling asleep, on Marco's couch, exhausted from school. And Natalie watched Marco. Watched him check Luca's homework at the kitchen counter, his brow furrowed in concentration. Watched him answer phone calls in Italian. Short, clipped conversations that sounded like orders but never threats. Watched him cook dinner for the boys after sessions, simple pasta or grilled chicken. Nothing fancy but made with careful attention. Watched him with Noah. That was the thing that broke through her defenses, the way Marco interacted with her son. Not like an obligation. Not like he was earning points. Just easily. Naturally. Like Noah belonged there. 3 weeks in, Natalie came out of the bathroom to find Marco on the living room floor with both boys, building an elaborate block tower. He was on his knees, still wearing his work clothes minus the jacket, explaining structural integrity to 2 children who absolutely did not understand, but were fascinated anyway. You need a strong foundation, Marco was saying, placing blocks carefully. Otherwise, everything falls apart. Like our tower last time, Luca remembered. Exactly. So we build from the bottom, stable, solid. Then we go up. Noah placed a block gently on top. It wobbled. Marco steadied it with one finger. There you go, bud, Marco said quietly. Perfect. Something in Natalie's chest cracked open. She'd been so focused on keeping Noah safe from his father, from the prosecutor who wanted custody not out of love but out of ownership, that she'd forgotten what it looked like when a man actually cared. When a man knelt down instead of loomed. When a man's hands were gentle instead of threatening. Marco looked up, caught her staring. Their eyes held for 3 seconds too long. Then Noah knocked over the tower accidentally, and both boys dissolved into giggles. And the moment passed. But Natalie felt it. The shift, the crack in her carefully constructed walls. After that night, she started noticing other things. The way Marco always made sure there was food available, juice boxes, crackers, fruit. Never asked if they were hungry, just put it out. The way he kept children's ibuprofen and Band-Aids in a drawer now, easy to access. The way he listened when Noah talked about his day at school. Actually listened, asked follow-up questions, remembered details. The way he never pushed, never asked invasive questions, just existed in their orbit, steady and solid, like he was waiting for something. 4 weeks in, Noah had a nightmare during Saturday tutoring. He'd fallen asleep on the couch again, and Natalie was helping Luca sound out words when Noah's scream cut through the house. Sharp, terrified, the sound of a child reliving trauma. Natalie was on her feet instantly, but Marco was faster. By the time she reached the living room, Marco was already there, kneeling beside the couch, not touching Noah but close. His voice was low, calm, the same tone he used for business calls but somehow softer. Noah, you're okay. You're safe. You're in my house. Your mom's here. Nobody's going to hurt you. Noah was crying, gasping for air, eyes wide and unseeing. Natalie dropped to her knees on the other side. Baby, I'm here. She took his hand. Mama's here. He was here, Noah sobbed. Daddy was here. He was yelling. He was gonna take me. No one's taking you. Marco's voice was firm now. Absolute. I promise you, Noah. No one. It shouldn't have worked. Noah didn't know Marco. Not really. Had no reason to. Trust him. But something in Marco's tone, in his complete certainty, cut through the panic. Noah's breathing slowed, his eyes focused. He looked at Marco, then at Natalie. I had a bad dream, he whispered. I know, baby. Natalie pulled him close. It's over now. But Noah was still looking at Marco. You promise? He can't take me? Marco's jaw tightened. I promise. Later, after Noah fell back asleep, this time in Natalie's lap, Marco brought her tea, sat in the armchair across from the couch, elbows on knees, that same assessing look on his face. How often does he have nightmares? Marco asked quietly. 2, 3 times a week. Natalie's hand was in Noah's hair, stroking absently. They're getting worse. Because he's getting older. He remembers more. It wasn't a question. Marco understood. What does he remember? Natalie looked down at her son. So small, so fragile, so completely hers to protect. Yelling, she said finally. Doors slamming, his father throwing things. Me trying to keep Noah out of the room when it got bad. Her voice cracked. I wasn't always successful. Marco was very still. Did he hit Noah? No, never. He knew that was the line. Hit Noah, and I'd go to the police no matter the consequences. Natalie's hand tightened in Noah's hair. He hit me instead. Made sure I understood the threat. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. When Natalie finally looked up, Marco's expression was blank. Completely, carefully blank, which somehow was more terrifying than anger would have been. Who is he? Marco asked. Voice still quiet, still controlled. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? The question came out sharper than intended. What are you going to do, Mr. DeLuca? Make him disappear? Solve my problems with violence? No. Marco leaned back slightly. I'm going to solve your problems legally, but I need a name. I don't want your help. Yes, you do. You're just afraid of what accepting it means. He was right. God help. Her. He was right. His name is David Chen, Natalie heard herself say. Assistant prosecutor for Cook County. He has connections everywhere. Police, judges, social workers. He filed for full custody 6 months ago, claimed I was mentally unstable. I had no money for a good lawyer. I knew I'd lose. So I ran. Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Does he know where you are? I don't think so. I use cash for everything. Work under the table at the school. No, social media, no credit cards, nothing he can trace. Except Noah's school enrollment. Natalie's stomach dropped. What? If he has prosecutor access, he can subpoena school records. Maybe not easily, but eventually. Marco pulled out his phone, started typing. We need to move you. Move me where? Somewhere he can't find. Somewhere safe. Marco looked up. I have a building in Hyde Park, secured, cameras, guard at the front, 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor, empty right now. You can have it. I can't afford... I'm not asking you to afford it. I'm offering it. Marco's voice was patient, like he was explaining something obvious. You keep tutoring Luca. I provide housing, fair trade. It wasn't fair. They both knew it. Tutoring 3 times a week didn't equal rent in Hyde Park. Why are you doing this? Natalie asked. Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. Because 10 years ago my sister died running from a man like your ex-husband. died because she was too afraid to ask for help, because she thought she had to do it alone. He met Natalie's eyes. I can't save her, but I can save you, if you let me. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Natalie saw grief in his face, old and deep and still bleeding. Saw the truth of it. This wasn't about her. Not entirely. This was about a sister he couldn't protect, a guilt he was trying to outrun. Okay, Natalie whispered. Okay. Marco nodded once. I'll have the apartment ready by next week. The apartment in Hyde Park was nothing like Natalie expected. She'd braced herself for something sterile, impersonal, a safe house that felt like a cage. Instead, Marco handed her keys to a 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, large windows that let in actual sunlight, and a kitchen with appliances that worked. The furniture was simple but comfortable. Clean sheets on the beds, towels in the bathroom. A small bookshelf already stocked with children's books. I had someone set it up, Marco said, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. If you need anything changed, it's perfect. Natalie set down the single duffel bag that contained everything she and Noah owned. Really, thank you. Marco nodded, handed her a second set of keys. Building entrance, your apartment, mailbox. The guard downstairs is Tommy. He knows you're here. If anyone asks for you, anyone at all, he'll call me first. You told him about David? I told him to be careful. Marco pulled a business card from his wallet, different from the one he'd given her before. This one had a second number handwritten on the back. This is my personal cell, not the office line. You need anything, day or night, you call. Natalie took the card, studied the handwritten numbers. His handwriting was precise, controlled, like everything else about him. You don't have to do all this. Yes, I do. Because of your sister. Marco's expression shuddered. Because it's the right thing to do. But Natalie was learning to read the spaces between his words, the micro-expressions that slipped through his careful control. This wasn't just about doing the right thing. This was personal. This was penance. What was her name? Natalie asked quietly. Isabella. Marco's voice was flat, but his jaw tightened. Bella. She was 28 when she died. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just stay safe. Marco stepped back toward the door. I'll see you Thursday for Luca's session. Unless you need time to settle in. Thursday's fine. Natalie hugged her arms around herself. Marco? His first name felt strange on her tongue, intimate, but Mr. DeLuca suddenly felt wrong. Why did you really become a lawyer? He paused, hand on the doorframe. Because my father taught me that power without legitimacy is just violence, and violence solves nothing. But you work for the Castellano family. I keep them legitimate. Marco met her eyes. I keep them from becoming what they could be. There's a difference. He left before she could ask what he meant. 2 months passed. December bled into January, then February. Natalie and Noah settled into the apartment like refugees learning to breathe again. Noah's nightmares decreased in frequency. Natalie stopped jumping every time someone knocked on the door. The apartment became home in a way nowhere else had since she ran. And 3 times a week, she went to Marco's house in Lincoln Park. Tutoring sessions remained professional. Luca's reading improved dramatically. He was nearly caught up with his grade level now, gaining confidence daily. But the edges of professionalism blurred in small ways. Marco started staying in the dining room during sessions instead of the kitchen. Started asking Natalie about teaching strategies, about childhood development, about things that had nothing to do with Luca. Started looking at her like she was more than just his nephew's tutor. And Natalie started noticing things about Marco that had nothing to do with safety or security. The way he tilted his head slightly when he was really listening. the rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face when Luca read a difficult word correctly. The unconscious habit of rolling his sleeves to his elbows when he cooked, revealing forearms marked with faint scars she didn't ask about. The way his voice softened when he talked to Noah, like her son was something precious that required gentle handling. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. It should have terrified her. Getting close to anyone was dangerous. Getting close to a man like Marco, a man with power, with connections to things she didn't want to understand, was suicidal. But somehow she wasn't terrified. She was curious. One Saturday in late February, everything changed. Natalie arrived for tutoring to find Marco's house in controlled chaos. Luca was crying in the living room. Marco was on the phone speaking rapid Italian, his voice hard and cold in a way Natalie had never heard. And Noah, still in the foyer with Natalie, went very still. "Mama," Noah whispered. "Is Uncle Marco mad?" Before Natalie could answer, Marco ended the call, saw them standing there, and his expression immediately shifted, smoothed out, became careful again. "Miss Chen, I'm sorry. There's been—" He stopped, glanced at Noah, recalibrated. "A situation at work. I need to handle it. Can we reschedule?" "Of course." Natalie's hand found Noah's shoulder. "Is Luca okay?" His mother called. Marco's voice was tight. "My sister, Bella's twin. She's been in and out of rehab for years. She wants to see Luca. I told her no. She didn't take it well." Twin sister. Natalie hadn't known. Hadn't known Bella left behind not just Marco, but another sister. Another person carrying grief. "I'm sorry," Natalie said. "That must be difficult." Difficult is relative. Marco ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its usual precision. "I need to go see her, make sure she understands the boundaries, but I can't bring Luca, and I can't leave him alone when he's this upset." The request was unspoken but clear. Natalie made the decision without thinking. "I'll stay with him," she said. "Both boys. However long you need." Marco's dark eyes searched her face. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." Natalie squeezed Noah's shoulder. "Go handle your family. We'll be here when you get back." Something shifted in Marco's expression. Gratitude, maybe, or relief, or something deeper that Natalie wasn't ready to name. "Thank you," he said quietly. "There's food in the fridge. Emergency numbers on the counter. I'll be back before dinner." He left within minutes, the front door closing behind him with controlled precision, even though Natalie could tell he wanted to slam it. She found Luca on the couch, tears streaking his face, clutching a throw pillow. Noah was already sitting beside him, patting, his arm awkwardly. "It's okay," Noah was saying. "Crying is okay. My mama says crying means you have feelings, and feelings are good." Natalie's heart cracked open a little wider. She sat on Luca's other side, put an arm around his shoulders. "Want to talk about it?" "My mom called," Luca said miserably. "She said she misses me. She said she wants to take me to the zoo, but Uncle Marco said no, and I don't understand why he's being mean." "Your uncle isn't being mean," Natalie said gently. "He's being protective. There's a difference." "But she's my mom." "I know, sweetheart. But sometimes grown-ups have problems that make it hard for them to take care of kids the way kids need. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means she's not ready yet." "Will she ever be ready?" Natalie thought about addiction, about the cycle of relapse and recovery she'd seen in students' parents over the years. "Maybe, I hope so. But until then, you have your Uncle Marco, and he loves you very much. He never says it. Some people show love instead of saying it." Natalie pulled Luca closer. "Does he make sure you eat breakfast every day?" "Yes." Does he help with your homework, even when he's tired from work? Yes. Does he read to you every night before bed? Yes. Luca's voice was small. Every single night. Even when he has to go back to work after. Then he loves you, Natalie said simply. He just shows it differently. Luca was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, like how you show Noah you love him by making sure he's safe all the time? The observation was too perceptive for a 6-year-old. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. Exactly like that, she whispered. They spent the afternoon playing board games, making grilled cheese sandwiches, watching cartoons. By the time Marco returned 6 hours later, both boys were drowsy and calm, curled up on either side of Natalie on the couch. Marco stood in the doorway, still wearing his coat, looking at the three of them with an expression Natalie couldn't read. Exhaustion, maybe. Or longing. Or both. How did it go? Natalie asked quietly, careful not to disturb the boys. She's agreed to supervised visits only, once a month, at a facility. Marco's voice was rough. She wasn't happy, but she agreed. That's good. Is it? Marco shrugged off his coat, moved to the armchair across from them. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm protecting Luca, or just controlling the situation because I couldn't control what happened to Bella. The honesty startled Natalie. Marco never talked like this, never showed uncertainty. You're protecting him, Natalie said firmly. Trust me. I know the difference between protection and control. Marco's eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. The acknowledgement that they were both survivors of different wars, both trying to keep children safe from the wreckage. Stay for dinner, Marco said. Please, I don't want to be alone with my thoughts tonight. It was the most vulnerable thing she'd ever heard him say. Okay, Natalie agreed. We'll stay. Marco cooked pasta carbonara from scratch while Natalie got the boys settled at the kitchen table. They moved around each other easily, a domestic choreography neither acknowledged, but both felt. Marco handed her a glass of wine without asking. She accepted without questioning. When their fingers brushed passing the Parmesan grater, neither pulled away immediately. Over dinner, Marco told stories about Bella and her twin, Gianna. Happy memories from before addiction, before abuse, before everything fell apart. Natalie listened and watched the grief in his eyes transform into something softer. Something like peace. After the boys fell asleep on the couch again, a recurring pattern now, Natalie helped Marco clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only developed between people who'd spent real time together, who'd seen each other tired and frustrated and raw. Can I ask you something? Marco said, drying the last plate. Yes. Why did you marry him? David Chen. Natalie had known this question would come eventually. Because he was charming at first. Successful. Stable. Everything I thought I wanted after growing up with nothing. She folded the dish towel precisely. And because I was 21 and stupid and thought love was supposed to feel like drowning. And now? Now I know love is supposed to feel like breathing. Natalie met his eyes. Like relief. The kitchen was very quiet. Marco was close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something woody and expensive that she'd started associating with safety. Natalie, he said, and her name in his voice sounded different than Miss Chen. Sounded personal. I need to tell you something. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Okay. I had my lawyers look into David Chen's custody case. Marco's expression was serious, measured. He's using his position to suppress evidence, threatening witnesses. He has a judge in his pocket who's guaranteed to rule in his favor if you ever surface. Natalie felt cold wash through her. So I can never stop running. Not unless we fight back. Marco stepped closer. I have resources David Chen doesn't. Lawyers who can't be bought. Connections that go deeper than his. I can protect you legally, permanently. But I need you to trust me. I do trust you. The words came out before Natalie could stop them. But they were true. Somewhere in the last 2 months, Marco had stopped being a stranger and started being something else. Then let me help you. Marco's hand came up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was feather-light, asking permission. Let me make sure you never have to run again. Natalie's breath caught. His hand was still close to her face, warm and solid. She could lean into it, could close the distance between them, could admit that somewhere along the whole way, gratitude had transformed into something more complicated. But Noah stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep, and reality crashed back. I should get him home, Natalie whispered. Marco's hand dropped. Of course. He drove them back to Hyde Park in his dark sedan, Noah sleeping in the back seat, Natalie hyper-aware of Marco's presence in the driver's seat beside her. When they arrived, Marco carried Noah upstairs, laid him gently in bed, stepped back to let Natalie tuck him in. At the back apartment door, Marco paused. Think about what I said, he told her. About fighting back. You don't have to live like this forever. I know. Natalie leaned against the doorframe. I'm just scared of what happens if we try and fail. Then we won't fail. Marco's voice was absolute. I promise you, Natalie. I won't let him take Noah. I won't let him hurt you. Not while I'm alive. The intensity in his dark eyes should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Good night, Marco, she said softly. Good night. He left, and Natalie closed the door, leaned against it, and let herself admit the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling for Marco DeLuca. Falling for the Consigliere with blood on his hands and gentleness in his touch. Falling for the man who read bedtime stories and made promises he intended to keep. Falling for someone who saw her not as a victim to save, but as a survivor to stand beside. And that, more than anything David Chen could do, terrified her completely. The text came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in early March. Natalie's phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from restless sleep. She grabbed it instinctively, heart already racing, because nothing good happened at 2:47 a.m. Marco, are you awake? She stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, then typed back. Natalie, now I am. What's wrong? Marco, nothing. Can't sleep. Thinking. Natalie, about? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Marco. You. Natalie's breath caught. She sat up in bed, pulled the blanket around her shoulders, and stared at those 2 letters like they might rearrange themselves into something less dangerous. Natalie. Marco. Marco. I know. Inappropriate. I'm your employer. You're vulnerable. I shouldn't have said anything. Natalie. That's not what I was going to say. Marco. Then what? Natalie closed her eyes, let herself admit it. Natalie. I've been thinking about you, too. The response was immediate. Marco. Can I call you? Natalie. Yes. Her phone rang 5 seconds later. Natalie answered, pressed it to her ear, heard Marco's voice low and rough on the other end. Hi, he said. Hi. I'm sorry for texting so late, He stopped, exhaled. I can't stop thinking about you, about Noah, about what it would be like if you stayed. Stayed where? Here, in my life, permanently. Marco's voice was careful, controlled even now. I know it's too soon. I know. You're still processing everything with David. But I need you to know that this isn't just about helping you. It stopped being just about helping you weeks ago. Natalie's hand tightened on the phone. When? When you stayed with Luca that day, I went to see Gianna. When you understood why I was protecting him without me having to explain. When you looked at me like I was more than just the dangerous man everyone else sees. You are more than that. Am I? Marco's laugh was bitter. I've done things, Natalie. Things I can't take back. Things that would make you run if you knew. I know what you are, Marco. I'm not stupid. Natalie pulled her knees to her chest. You work for the Castellano family. You're their Consigliere. You make problems disappear. I know that means you've hurt people. And you're still here. Because I also know you read bedtime stories. You make pancakes for children who aren't yours. You keep medical supplies in your house just in case. You offered me safety, when I had none. Natalie's voice cracked slightly. You're not a good man, Marco. But you're a good man to the people you choose to protect. And somehow, I'm one of those people. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Natalie thought he might have hung up. Then, I'm falling in love with you, Marco said quietly. And I don't know what to do about it. Natalie closed her eyes, let the words wash over her. She should say this was a bad idea. Should remind him about power, dynamics, and vulnerability, and the fact that she was still legally married to a man who wanted to destroy her. Should protect herself, but she was so tired of protecting herself. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Because of David? Because of everything. Because you could hurt me worse than he ever did. Because Noah is already attached to you. Because if this goes wrong, I lose more than just you. I lose the safety you've given us. Natalie's throat tightened. I can't afford to lose that, Marco. I can't. Then we don't let it go wrong. Marco's voice was firm again, decided. We do this carefully, slowly. We protect Noah first, always. And we fight David Chen together, as partners. Partners. You're not a damsel I'm rescuing, Natalie. You're a survivor I'm standing beside. There's a difference. The distinction mattered more than he could know. Okay, Natalie said. Okay. We try. We try. Marco agreed. Now go back to sleep. I'll see you tomorrow for Luca's session. Marco? Yes? Thank you for being honest. Always, he promised. With you always. They hung up, and Natalie lay back down, staring at the ceiling, feeling something warm and terrifying bloom in her chest. Hope. Real hope. The dangerous kind. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a dream that might shatter at any moment. Marco didn't change how he acted in front of the boys. Still professional, still careful. But in small moments, when Luca and Noah weren't paying attention, he'd brush his fingers against Natalie's, would look at her like she was something precious, would smile in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in years. They talked, long conversations after tutoring sessions, after the boys fell asleep, sitting in Marco's kitchen over wine or tea. Natalie told him about growing up in foster care, about choosing teaching because she wanted to give kids the stability she never had. Marco told her about his father, captain in the Castellano family, who'd taught his children that loyalty was everything, that family came first, that you protected your own no matter the cost. He died when I was 19, Marco said one night. Heart attack. Dropped dead in the middle of a meeting. Bella and Gianna were 17. I had to step up, take over his responsibilities, keep the family from falling apart. That's a lot of responsibility for a teenager. I didn't have a choice. Marco swirled wine in his glass. The Castellanos needed someone they could trust, someone who could navigate both worlds, legitimate business and the family's other interests. I went to law school, passed the bar, became their consigliere by 25. Do you regret it? Marco considered. I regret what it cost. Bella and Gianna needed a brother, not a surrogate father. I was too strict, too controlling, trying to protect them the way my father would have. But I pushed too hard. His jaw tightened. Bella met a man who seemed gentle compared to me. By the time I realized he was worse, it was too late. You can't blame yourself for her choices. Can't I? Marco looked at her. I was so focused on keeping them safe from external threats that I didn't see the one that got in close. I failed her, Natalie. I won't fail Luca. And I won't fail you. The intensity in his voice made Natalie's breath catch. You haven't failed anyone. Not yet, Marco said. But David Chen is still out there. Still a threat. And until that's resolved, you're not truly safe. The reminder was a cold splash of reality. Because Marco was right. No matter how secure the apartment, how careful they were, David was still hunting. Still waiting for Natalie to make a mistake. The mistake came on March 23rd. Natalie took Noah to the Museum of Science and Industry, a field trip with his kindergarten class. She'd cleared it with Marco first, made sure there would be chaperones, made sure she could blend into the crowd. It should have been fine. But David had been watching the school, had been patient, methodical, waiting for exactly this opportunity. Natalie didn't realize anything was wrong until Noah vanished. 1 minute he was looking at the Apollo 8 command module with 3 other kids. The next, he was gone. Natalie's heart stopped. She called his name, pushed through the crowd of children and parents, panic rising with each second. Then she saw him. 50 feet away, near the museum exit, holding the hand of a man in a dark suit. David. He'd cut his hair shorter, grown a beard, but Natalie would recognize him anywhere. Would recognize the possessive grip on Noah's wrist, the false smile he gave other museum goers, the way he was moving quickly toward the door. Natalie ran. She reached them just as David pushed through the exit, grabbed Noah's other arm, yanked him back. Let him go, she hissed. David's smile widened. Up close, she could see the barely controlled rage in his eyes. Hello, Natalie. Miss. Me. I said let him go. He's my son. I have every right. You have no rights. Natalie pulled Noah behind her, putting her body between them. Noah was crying now, terrified, clinging to her legs. Leave us alone. Or what? David stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You'll call the police? Please do. I have the custody order right here. You're in violation. I could have you arrested right now for parental kidnapping. He wasn't bluffing. Natalie could see the folded papers in his jacket pocket. Could see the triumph in his eyes. Noah, David said, his voice going sickeningly sweet. Come to Daddy. We're going home. No! Noah's scream was raw, terrified. No! I want Uncle Marco! David's expression darkened. Who the hell is Uncle Marco? Before Natalie could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Marco, she answered, hand shaking. Marco, where are you? His voice was sharp, urgent. The school called. Said there was an incident at the museum. David's here, Natalie said, loud enough for David to hear. He tried to take Noah. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't let him leave with Noah. Do whatever you have to do. David's eyes narrowed. Who is that? My lawyer, Natalie lied. And he's on his way. Your lawyer, David laughed. With what money, Natalie? You can barely afford rent. With my money, Marco's voice came through the phone, loud enough for David to hear. And I suggest you step away from Miss Chen and her son before this gets ugly. David's expression shifted. Calculation, then dismissal. I don't care who you hired. I have a court order. The law is on my side. The law is on the side of whoever has the better lawyers, Marco said coldly. And trust me, prosecutor, mine are better than yours. Natalie saw uncertainty flicker in David's eyes. He was used to being the one with power, with connections, used to intimidating people with his position. I'll be filing for contempt of court, David said, stepping back. And kidnapping charges. You're done, Natalie. No. Marco's voice came through the phone again. You are. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, answered. Chen. Natalie watched his face drain of color as he listened, watched him look at her with something between fury and fear. I don't know what you're talking about, David said into his phone. That's not... You can't prove... He hung up, looked at Natalie. What did you do? I stopped running, Natalie said, quietly. Marco's car pulled up to the museum entrance. He got out, and Natalie saw David's expression change when he registered who was approaching. Saw recognition. Saw fear. Because Marco DeLuca might introduce himself as a lawyer, but anyone with connections in Chicago knew exactly what family he worked for. Mr. Chen, Marco said pleasantly, reaching them. I'm Marco DeLuca, Miss Chen's legal counsel. I believe we need to talk. David's hand tightened on his phone. I have nothing to say to you. Then just listen. Marco's voice went cold. I've spent the last month building a case against you. Evidence of falsified court documents. Witness intimidation. Use of your position to suppress evidence of domestic abuse. I have recordings. I have testimonies. I have enough to destroy your career and put you in prison. You're bluffing. Am I? Marco pulled out his phone, played an audio file. David's voice came through, clear and damning, talking to someone about threatening Natalie's former lawyer. I have 17 more of these, plus security footage, plus medical records from when Natalie was hospitalized that you tried to seal. David's face went white. This is entrapment. This is justice. Marco stepped closer, lowered his voice. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop the custody case. You're going to sign over full parental rights to Natalie. You're going to disappear from their lives permanently. And in exchange, I won't release this evidence to your superiors, the Bar Association, and every major news outlet in Chicago. And if I refuse? Marco smiled. It was terrifying. Then I stopped playing nice. The threat hung in the air between them. David looked at Marco, at Natalie, at Noah still crying behind her. Calculation played out across his face. Then defeat. I need time to think, David said. You have 24 hours, Marco said. After that, the evidence goes public. Your choice. David left without another word. Natalie watched him disappear into the parking lot, legs shaking so badly she thought she might collapse. Marco's hand found her elbow, steadying her. You okay? You threatened him, Natalie whispered. Yes. You were prepared to destroy him. Yes. How long have you been investigating? Marco met her eyes. Since the day you told me his name. Natalie should have been horrified. Should have been afraid of the kind of man who could casually threaten a prosecutor with career destruction. But all she felt was relief. Profound, devastating relief. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Marco said. He might not take the deal. But Natalie knew better. She'd seen David's face, seen the fear. David Chen was a coward who used power to control weaker people. When confronted with someone stronger, someone more dangerous, he'd fold. And Marco DeLuca was the most dangerous man in Chicago. David Chen signed the papers 36 hours later. Marco called Natalie at 9 p.m. on a Friday, his voice, carefully neutral. It's done. Full custody to you. He's relinquishing all parental rights. My lawyers are filing the paperwork Monday morning." Natalie sat down on her couch, phone pressed to her ear, unable to speak. Noah was already asleep in his room, exhausted from a long day at school. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of her own heartbeat. "Natalie?" Marco's voice softened. "You there?" "I'm here." Her voice cracked. I can't believe it's real." "It's real. You're safe. Noah's safe. David Chen won't come near you again." "What did you do to make him sign?" Marco was quiet for a moment. "I showed him what would happen if he didn't. That's all you need to know." But Natalie could imagine. Could picture Marco in some expensive office, laying out evidence with surgical precision, explaining exactly how David's life would unravel. Could picture the cold certainty in Marco's dark eyes as he made promises he fully intended to keep. "Are you afraid of me now?" Marco asked quietly. Natalie considered the question honestly. Was she afraid? Of Marco's power, of his connections, of what he was capable of when someone threatened the people he protected? "No," she said finally. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of how much I need you." "You don't need me, Natalie. You're strong enough on your own." "Maybe, but I don't want to be on my own anymore." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. She stopped, swallowed hard. "Can you come over?" "Now?" "Now." 20 minutes later, Marco was at her door. Still in his work clothes, dark suit, white shirt open at the collar, tie gone. He looked tired. Looked like he'd been running on adrenaline and black coffee for days. Natalie let him in, closed the door, and did what she'd been wanting to do for weeks. She kissed him. Marco went still for half a second, surprised. Then his hands came up to frame her face, gentle and careful, and he kissed her back. Slow, deep, like he was memorizing the moment. Like he'd been waiting for this just as long as she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the night you showed up at my door with Noah," he said roughly. "Took you long enough. I was trying to be respectful, professional." Marco's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Trying not to take advantage of the situation." "You're not taking advantage." Natalie's hands fisted in his shirt. "I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Even knowing what I am? Especially knowing what you are." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You're dangerous, Marco. But you're dangerous in the right ways. You protect people. You fight for them. You don't just talk about doing the right thing. You actually do it. I've done terrible things. I know, and I don't care." Natalie cupped his face. "Because I've also seen you read bedtime stories to 2 little boys. Seen you cook them breakfast and help with homework and carry Noah upstairs when he falls asleep. Seen you be gentle when the world taught you to be hard. That's who you are to me." Marco's eyes closed. "You make me want to be better. You already are better. You just don't see it yet." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Natalie let herself fall into it. Let herself trust that this man, this complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly gentle man, wouldn't break her the way David had. That this was different, real. When they moved to the couch, when Marco pulled her into his lap and held her like she was something precious, Natalie felt the last of her walls crumble. She'd spent so long protecting herself, keeping everyone at arm's length, convinced that letting someone close would only end in pain. But Marco's hands were careful on her waist. His kisses were patient. And when she pulled back, overwhelmed by the intensity of feeling too much too fast, he just tucked her head under his chin and held her. "We can go slow," he murmured. against her hair. "We have time now. All the time in the world." Natalie breathed him in. Expensive cologne and laundry detergent and something uniquely Marco. "What happens next?" "Whatever you want. You're free now, Natalie. From David. From running. From fear." Marco's arms tightened around her. "You get to choose what your life looks like. And if you choose me, I'll spend every day making sure you never regret it." "I already choose you," Natalie whispered. "I chose you the night I knocked on your door. I just didn't know it yet." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on her couch, and Natalie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The next few weeks were a strange adjustment to freedom. Natalie stopped looking over her shoulder every time she left the apartment, stopped jumping when her phone rang, started making plans beyond the next 24 hours. She enrolled Noah in a soccer league, made actual friends with other teachers at school, went grocery shopping without checking every face in the store for David's, and she let Marco into her life completely. Not as a rescuer, not as a protector she owed something to, but as a partner. Someone who showed up for tutoring sessions and stayed for dinner, who helped Noah with a school project about dinosaurs and made the entire experience fun instead of frustrating, who kissed Natalie goodnight at her door and never pushed for more until she was ready, who made her feel, for the first time ever, like she was enough exactly as she was. Luca's reading caught up to grade level by April. His teacher sent a glowing progress report, commenting on his improved confidence and enthusiasm. Marco framed it, hung it in Luca's room, and took both boys out for ice cream to celebrate. Natalie watched him with the boys at the ice cream parlor, Marco wiping chocolate off Noah's face, laughing when Luca told a terrible joke, looking utterly content in a way she'd never seen him look during business calls or family meetings. This was who he was when he let his guard down. This was the man underneath the Consigliere. "You're staring," Marco said, catching her eye across the table. "I like watching you with them." "Yeah?" He smiled, real and unguarded. "I like being with them. With all of you." "Uncle Marco," Noah piped up, strawberry ice cream on his chin. "Can we have a sleepover at your house? Like a real sleepover with sleeping bags and movies?" Marco glanced at Natalie. She nodded permission. "Absolutely," Marco said. "This weekend?" Both boys cheered, and Natalie felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. This was what family felt like, what home felt like. The sleepover happened on Saturday. Marco set up the living room with sleeping bags, pillows, popcorn, and a stack of age-appropriate movies. The boys were in heaven. Natalie curled up on the couch beside Marco, his arm around her shoulders, watching Luca and Noah laugh at animated characters. "This is nice," Marco said quietly, his lips close to her ear. "It is. I could get used to this." Natalie looked up at him. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Marco's dark eyes held hers. All of it. The chaos, the noise, the sticky fingerprints on my windows. I could get used to coming home to this every day. Is that an invitation? It's a hope. Marco's hand found hers, laced their fingers together. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I want this, Natalie. I want you and Noah in my life. Permanently. Not just tutoring sessions and supervised visits. I want... He stopped, searching for words. I want to be a family. Natalie's throat tightened. Noah's already calling you Uncle Marco. I noticed. He asks about you every day, talks about you at school, drew a picture of our family last week and included you in it. Marco's expression softened. What did the picture look like? You, me, him, and Luca, standing in front of a house. He drew you holding his hand. Natalie's voice cracked slightly. He's never drawn his biological father. Not once. But he drew you. Natalie, I'm not trying to pressure you, she said quickly. I just need you to understand what you're signing up for. Noah's attached. Really attached. If this doesn't work out, if you decide this isn't what you want, it won't just break my heart. It'll break his. Then I won't let it not work out. Marco cupped her face with his free hand. I'm not David, Natalie. I don't make promises I can't keep. And I'm promising you right now, I'm in this. For Noah. For you. For us. Completely. Natalie believed him. God help her. She believed him. Okay, she whispered. Okay. They kissed, soft and sweet, until Luca made exaggerated gagging sounds and Noah giggled. Marco pulled back, laughing, and threw a pillow at his nephew. The boys retaliated, and within seconds it was an all-out pillow fight, the four of them laughing and shrieking and making a complete mess of Marco's pristine living room. Later, after the boys finally fell asleep in their sleeping bags, Natalie and Marco cleaned up in comfortable silence, loading the dishwasher, putting away leftover popcorn, moving around each other with the ease of people who'd done this 100 times. Stay, Marco said as Natalie started gathering her things. Don't drive home tonight. Stay here. In the guest room, he added quickly. I just want you here. Natalie looked at him. At this man who'd given her safety and freedom and something that felt dangerously close to love. Who was asking her to stay not for sex, not for obligation, but just to be close. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Marco's smile was worth everything. She borrowed one of his t-shirts to sleep in. Soft, oversized, smelling like him. Marco walked her to the guest room, kissed her goodnight at the door, and didn't push for more. But an hour later, Natalie couldn't sleep. The bed was comfortable. The room was quiet. But something felt wrong. Incomplete. She got up, padded down the hall to Marco's room, and knocked softly. Come in, his voice called. He was in bed, reading by lamplight, still dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Can't sleep? He asked. I don't want to be alone, Natalie admitted. Can I? She gestured at the bed. Marco set his book aside immediately. Of course. Natalie climbed in beside him, and Marco pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. She fit, against him perfectly, her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady under her ear. This okay? Marco asked. This is perfect. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and Natalie dreamed of houses and families and futures that didn't involve running. But peace never lasted forever. 2 weeks later, Marco's phone rang at 3 a.m. He answered it immediately, habit from years of late-night emergencies, and Natalie woke to the sound of his voice, sharp and cold. When? Marco was already, getting out of bed, pulling on clothes. Where? No, don't do anything. I'm on my way. He hung up, and Natalie saw the tension in every line of his body. What's wrong? She asked. Jana. Marco's jaw was tight. She relapsed, overdosed. She's at Northwestern Memorial. Oh my God, is she alive? Barely. Marco was moving fast now, grabbing his wallet and keys. I need to go. Can you stay with Luca? He's asleep downstairs in his room. Of course. Go. Marco kissed her quickly, hard, then left. Natalie sat in his bed, listening to his car pull out of the driveway, and felt the familiar cold wash of fear. Because she knew what addiction looked like, knew what relapse meant, knew that Marco was about to walk into a hospital and face the same nightmare that had taken Bella. She got up, checked on the boys, both still sleeping soundly, and made coffee. Waited. Marco called at 7 a.m. His voice was wrecked. She's stable. They're keeping her for observation. He sounded exhausted. I need to stay here. Make sure she doesn't leave against medical advice. Can you— I'll get the boys to school, Natalie said immediately. I'll handle everything. You take care of your sister. Thank you. A pause. I love you. The words hung in the air. Marco had never said them out loud before. Neither had she. I love you too, Natalie said. Come home when you can. I will. Natalie got Luca and Noah ready for school, packed lunches, did drop-off, went to her own classroom and taught kindergarteners about the letter Q and the number 17. Went through the motions while her mind was with Marco at Northwestern Memorial, watching his sister fight for her life. He came home that night looking like he'd aged 10 years. Natalie fed him, got him to shower, held him while he slept fitfully on the couch. And when he woke up, she listened while he talked about Bella and Gianna, about the guilt that never went away, about feeling like he was failing everyone he tried to protect. You're not failing, Natalie said firmly. You can't control addiction, Marco. You can only control how you show up. And you show up every single time. It's not enough. It's all we can do. Natalie took his face in her hands. You taught me that. When I was running from David, drowning in fear, you showed me that showing up was enough. That trying was enough. Now I'm telling you the same thing. You show up for Gianna, for Luca, for me and Noah. You show up even when it's hard. That's what matters. Marco's eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but he nodded. Okay. They held each other in the dark, and Natalie realized something. This was what love looked like. Not the fairy tale version, not the easy version, but the real version, showing up for each other in the 3 a.m. phone calls, and the hospital waiting rooms, and the moments when everything felt like it was falling apart. This was what she'd been looking for her whole life. And she'd found it with the most dangerous man in Chicago. June arrived with the kind of Chicago summer that made you forget the brutal winter. Warm sun, Lake Michigan glittering in the distance, flowers blooming in Lincoln Park's manicured gardens. And with it came Noah's kindergarten graduation. Natalie stood in the school gymnasium, watching her son in his tiny cap and gown, and felt her chest swell with emotion. 6 months ago, they'd been running, hiding, barely surviving. Now Noah was graduating kindergarten, surrounded by friends, safe, and happy, and whole. Marco's hand found hers, squeezed gently. He'd taken the afternoon off work, worn a suit that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly salary, and sat through an hour-long ceremony of 5-year-olds singing off key and forgetting their lines without a single complaint. He looks happy, Marco murmured. He is happy. Natalie leaned into him slightly. Because of you. Because of us, Marco corrected. Luca sat on Marco's other side, fidgeting in his button-down shirt, clearly bored but trying to behave. Natalie had been tutoring him for 6 months now, and he'd transformed from a struggling reader into a confident student who'd just finished first grade with honors. The change in him was remarkable. The change in all of them was remarkable. When the ceremony ended, Noah ran to them, his cap askew, clutching his certificate. Mama, did you see? I didn't trip. I saw, baby. I'm so proud of you. Natalie hugged him tight. Uncle Marco, did you see too? I saw everything. Marco crouched down to Noah's level, straightened his cap. You did great, buddy. Noah beamed. Then, with the blunt honesty of a 5-year-old, are you going to be my real dad now? The question landed like a bomb. Natalie froze. Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. What do you mean, Noah? Marco asked carefully. Tommy at school says his mom got married, and now his stepdad is his real dad. Are you and Mama going to get married? Natalie felt her face burn. Noah, that's not... Would you want that? Marco interrupted, his eyes still on Noah. If your mom and I got married? Noah nodded vigorously. Then you'd live with us all the time, and we could have breakfast together every day, and you could read me stories every night instead of just sometimes. Those are good reasons, Marco said seriously. Then he looked up at Natalie, and the expression on his face made her heart stop. What do you think, Mama? Should we make this official? Natalie stared at him. Marco, you can't... This isn't... We haven't even talked about... I know. Marco stood, took her hand. But I've been thinking about it. A lot. And I think Noah might be onto something. He glanced around the crowded gymnasium. Though this probably isn't the best place for this conversation. Uncle Marco's house has a big backyard, Luca piped up. We could have a party there. Marco laughed. You're right, Luca. We could. He looked back at Natalie. What do you say? Graduation party at my place? We can talk properly after. Natalie's head was spinning, but she nodded. Okay. The party started small. Just the four of them. Pizza on Marco's back deck. The boys running around the yard. But then Marco made calls, and within 2 hours, the house was filled with people. Natalie met Marco's colleagues from the law firm, the legitimate one, met his cousin Nico, who ran security for the Castellano family, and looked at Natalie like he was assessing whether she was good enough for Marco. Met Dr. Abadi, who smiled warmly and told her Noah looked healthy. Met people from Marco's world that she'd only heard about in whispers. And they all treated her like she belonged. Like she was already part of Marco's life in a way that couldn't be undone. As the sun set and the boys finally crashed on the living room couch, exhausted from playing, Marco pulled Natalie into his study, closed the door, took both her hands. I meant it, he said, about making this official. Marco, let me finish. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I know we've only been together officially for a few months. I know this is fast. But I've been alone for a long time, Natalie. And then you showed up at my door with Noah, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. Suddenly I had a reason to come home. A reason to be better. You were already better. Not like this. Marco shook his head. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. The man Noah thinks I am. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me. Then marry me. The words were simple, direct. Not because Noah asked. Not because it makes sense on paper. Marry me because I love you. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Because I want to be Noah's father in every way that matters. Because... He stopped, swallowed hard. Because you're my second chance, Natalie, and I don't want to waste it. Natalie's eyes burned. I don't have a ring to give you back. Marco smiled slightly. Is that a yes? That's a... I need to think about what this means. Natalie squeezed his hands. I love you, Marco. God, I love you so much it scares me. But marriage is... It's permanent. It's legal. It's... Protection. Marco finished. Legal protection for you and Noah. My name on documents. My resources backing you. Full parental rights for me to protect Noah if anything ever happens to you. He cupped her face. I'm not asking you to marry me just because I love you, though I do. I'm asking because it's the smart thing to do. The safe thing. The thing that makes sure you're never vulnerable again. That's very romantic, Natalie said dryly, but she was smiling through tears. I'm a lawyer. Romance isn't my strong suit. Marco kissed her forehead. But keeping you safe is. So marry me, Natalie Chen. Let me make this permanent. Natalie closed her eyes, let herself imagine it. Marriage to Marco. Living in this house with Noah and Luca. Building something real and lasting. Being a family not just in feeling but in law. Being safe. Being loved. Being chosen. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes, I'll marry you. Marco's entire expression transformed. He pulled her into his arms, kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. And Natalie kissed him back, tasting salt from her own tears, feeling something huge and terrifying and wonderful settle into place in her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. I don't have a ring yet, he admitted. I was going to wait, plan something better, but Noah's smarter than both of us, Natalie said. He knew what he wanted, what we all wanted. Tomorrow I'll take you to get a ring, whatever you want. I don't need anything expensive. You're getting something expensive anyway. Marco kissed her again, quick and sweet. My future wife deserves the best. Future wife. The word sent a thrill through Natalie. They went back to the party, and Marco pulled Noah aside, knelt down to his level. Hey, buddy, remember what you asked me earlier? About being your real dad? Noah nodded, suddenly shy. Well, I talked to your mom, and she said yes, we're going to get married, which means I'll be your stepdad officially. Is that okay with you? Noah's eyes went huge. Really? Really? So you'll be my dad? Like forever? Forever, Marco promised. If that's what you, want. Noah threw his arms around Marco's neck, and Natalie watched this dangerous, complicated man hold her son like he was the most precious thing in the world. I want that, Noah whispered into Marco's shoulder. I want you to be my dad for real. Marco's eyes were suspiciously bright when he pulled back. Then it settled. You're stuck with me, kid. Good, Noah said solemnly. Then, with 5-year-old logic, does this mean Luca is my brother now? Cousin, Marco corrected. But close. Enough. Both boys cheered and ran off to play, and Natalie leaned into Marco's side, overwhelmed. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect. And she meant it. They got married 3 months later in Marco's backyard, surrounded by late September flowers and too many people from both their worlds. Natalie wore a simple white dress. Marco wore a suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Noah was the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously. Luca was the best man, even though he was 7. When Marco said his vows, promising to protect her, to love her, to be the father Noah deserved, Natalie cried. When she said hers, promising to stand beside him, to trust him, to build a life together, Marco's voice cracked slightly. They kissed as husband and wife, and everyone cheered, and Natalie felt like she'd stepped into a dream. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. Noah danced with everyone, his new suit jacket abandoned. Within 10 minutes, Luca gave a toast that was mostly incoherent, but very sweet. Dr. Abadi congratulated them both and told Marco that Bella would be proud. And late in the evening, when most of the guests had left and the boys were asleep upstairs, Natalie and Marco sat on the back deck, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. Mrs. DeLuca, Marco said, testing out the name. Still getting used to it, Natalie admitted. You have the rest of your life to get used to it. Marco kissed the top of her head. Thank you. For what? For trusting me, for giving me a second chance, for letting me be Noah's father. His arm tightened around her. For saving me. I didn't save you, Marco. We saved each other. And it was true. Natalie had knocked on Marco's door that November night looking for safety, and she'd found it. But Marco had found something too. Purpose, family, redemption. They'd both been broken in different ways, both running from different ghosts. But they'd found each other, and that had made all the difference. 18 months later, Noah stood in Marco's home office, clutching a Father's Day card he'd made at school. He was 6 now, taller, more confident. Natalie watched from the doorway as her son approached Marco, who was working at his desk. "Dad?" Noah said quietly. Marco looked up immediately. He still wasn't used to being called Dad, even though Noah had been saying it for months. His expression softened. "Hey, buddy. What's up?" "I made you something at school." Noah handed over the card. "For Father's Day." Marco took it carefully, opened it. Inside, Noah had drawn a picture of the 3 of them, Noah, Natalie, and Marco, standing in front of their house. Above it, in careful kindergarten handwriting, "To the best dad. I love you." Marco stared at it for a long moment. Then he pulled Noah into his lap, held him close. "Thank you," Marco said, his voice rough. "This is the best present I've ever gotten." "Really?" "Really." Noah hugged him tighter. "I'm glad you're my dad." "I'm glad I'm your dad too," Marco said. "Proudest thing I've ever been." From the doorway, Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, because this moment right here, was what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not safety, though they had that. Not security, though they had that too. Love. Real, messy, imperfect, beautiful love. The kind that showed up when things got hard. The kind that protected without controlling. The kind that chose you every single day. Marco caught her eye over Noah's head, smiled that rare, unguarded smile he saved just for her. Mouthed, "I love you." Natalie smiled back. Mouthed, "I love you too." And she meant it with everything she had. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expected. Sometimes they're the ones the world told us to fear. Sometimes they're the dangerous ones, the complicated ones, the ones carrying their own scars. But if you're brave enough to see past the surface, to trust despite the fear, to let someone in even when every instinct says to run, sometimes you find that the most dangerous person in the room is the safest place you've ever been. Marco DeLuca was a Consigliere, a lawyer for one of Chicago's most powerful crime families. A man who'd done things Natalie would never fully know about, and probably didn't want to. But he was also the man who opened his door at midnight when a desperate mother needed help, who read bedtime stories and made pancakes, and kept medical supplies just in case, who loved with a fierceness that matched his reputation for ruthlessness, who chose family over everything else. And Natalie Chen, now Natalie DeLuca, was the woman who'd been brave enough to knock on that door. Brave enough to trust. Brave enough to let herself be loved by someone everyone else feared. They'd both been broken, both been running from ghosts, but they'd found each other in the dark, and they'd built something beautiful out of the wreckage. A home, a family, a second chance. And that, more than anything, was worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment resonated most with you? Hit like to support more stories like this, and subscribe to Crimson Redemption Stories. We bring you new emotional journeys every single day. Before you go, check out the next video, or explore our playlist for more tales of love, redemption, and second chances that prove even the most broken people deserve happiness. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places. Good night, and stay safe.